Oh God. Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Say Report. This is Sejohn Sarowick and my host companion Devon Decker,
Hi, I'm Devon Decker.
and I'm trying to explain to him what Cookie Clicker is.
And you know what? It was too good not to get on digital tape. That's why I
Yeah,
threw you into it.
yeah, no, but idle clicking games are fascinating to me. They kind of play with the man's need to fidget. So like you just sit there and you're just clicking a button, and then eventually you train the game to click the button for you, and then you just sit back and watch those numbers grow, and that's really the only benefit to these types of games. But yeah, Cookie Clicker is kind of one of the big free ones online, and if you ever want to lose yourself for like an hour, go and check it out because it's still up and running, people. In fact, it just updated today.
And that's why
um,
you'll play. Is that like the Simpsons Tapped Out? Is like that type of game,
um,
or
no,
okay? I
I
guess that's
mean,
tapping, not clicking. My
well,
bad.
and well, no, the big thing that that Tapped Out does, and a lot of games in that specific, it's a subset of the genre of the idle clicking genre because there's a lot less for you to actually do. Like the whole thing is about setting up timers and then waiting days to go like check your progress on that sort of stuff. The stuff that I'm doing with like Cookie Clicker, and there's a couple of other really good ones out there. It's much more immediate gratification, and like it's much more like playing a slot machine. There's a lot of information coming at you really fast, and you're getting just a bunch of information and numbers, and that's much more pleasing to me. I played the Futurama one for a while there. I forget what the name of that one was.
Oh,
Um,
you mean sponsored by Nerdist? That one. That one. That one. They
um,
did a new episode. That's all fucking sponsorship. I'm sorry. That episode upset me a little bit. Mostly because like I love Futurama. I absolutely love Futurama, and the ending that we got was good. Like it was a pretty good ending to that show. I
yeah, yeah,
don't
yeah.
need it to come back. Like that was satisfying. I mean, the robot's hands are idle playthings was a pretty satisfying ending to the show too.
Of course.
Yeah, I'll be honest about all of that. I'm sorry, I'm going off. And then like they're like, oh, we have this, and it's like a radio drama, and I'm like, ooh, exciting. And I'm like, this is worse than the comics, and I love the comics. Like, oh,
Oh, and comics are going away. Did you know that?
what? The Futurama
Yeah.
comics are ending?
Well, the big thing is that the Simpsons comics are actually the big ones that are ending. I don't know if Futurama is meant to end or not, but the problem is that if the Simpsons comics I mean, not if, when they've officially announced they're ending the run of them. Bongo Comics, like they
Bye,
don't
Bongo.
yeah, they won't survive. So if they so I bet you that, if Futurama wants to stick around, they're gonna have to find somebody else that's gonna pick them up, like IDW or something, which I'm
And
sure
I'm
they
sure
will.
IDW was like just thirsty in the corner,
Yeah,
waiting
right.
for Bongo to cancel The Simpsons. Like, this is our chance.
Yeah, exactly, right. Like, yeah, but yeah. So Simpsons comics are going to be ending soon. It's sad, but I mean, a 25-year run on a comic line based on a TV show is not a bad like.
Simpsons comics are the best. I have to be
I
honest with you. I
I love them.
love them.
Yeah, yeah, man. I had a couple of collections when I was a kid that like they were kind of the first comics I really got into. Um, it, I mean, when you're really young and you just want more of what you're already consuming, it was a no-brainer for my parents to be buying us that sort of stuff. And so my first collections of things like comics and uh well, I was trying to think of Viewmaster discs and shit like that were always things like The Simpsons and stuff like that. Yeah, sad day.
Yeah, no, it's I mean,
How did
I
we get on
remember
Bongo Comics?
we got
Oh,
on
we were
Bongo
talking about
comics
clicker
because
games, right?
clicking
Yeah,
games
yeah.
and that got to tapped out and that got to Futurama. But that's I used to. I don't know if you used to do this. This was me. Whenever I used to go to the Stop and Shop, like the grocery store, I would go to the book section and I would just grab a book and I would read it while my mother was shopping.
Yeah,
Like that's
yeah,
how I read a lot of Goosebump books. I'll be honest with you. In
yeah.
trips to the
Sorry,
Stop and Shop.
sorry, Mr. Stein.
No, no, he understands. He's like, I'm rich enough, but make sure you buy my Fear Street books.
And don't forget, there's a sequel to Goosebumps coming out. Nobody really wants to see it. I know.
I don't understand. It doesn't make sense in
It's
the
just the
world
same
that they
movie.
established from the
Yeah.
first.
uh,
Oh no, the typewriter. The typewriter brings the stuff to life. Oh no, there's one more hidden book. What hidden book?
yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah,
I'm
it's weird.
excited though. It's like Hocus Pocus, kinda.
Yeah, my big problem with it is literally almost exactly beat for beat the same movie.
Oh, what are they gonna do, Sejohn? Have the Goosebumps books turn into a video game and suck them into it? That's a stupid idea for a sequel too. So anyway, I watched Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle this week.
So yeah, the going to the grocery store and reading Goosebumps books while mom shops was definitely key to my upbringing as well.
Right, and then, but okay, but then comics. I started to find comics there as they like shifted away from books that like
Hmm.
grubby-handed kids would read, and
Yeah,
and
yeah,
just
yeah.
carried magazines. And like for some reason, Bongo Comics magazine. So the first Simpsons comic I remember buying was it was a sequel to Brother from Another Series, which is when Sideshow Bob's brother Cecil is introduced, and he's voiced by
Right,
David
right,
Hyde
right.
Pierce, and it's brilliant. Like it is, it's brilliant. They did such good things, and in that one, he decides he wants a nemesis too. And I will remember, I've used this line in life ever since I read it in a comic book, and that is, he's like, "Oh, I'll go after Bart Simpson, right? I'll do what my brother can never do." No, that'd be worse than Jim Belushi in Blues Brothers 2000.
Oh God.
It is like, yeah, it's true. That would have been like they did the right thing, bringing in Dan Connors, John Belushi. I know his name, John Goodman. Fuck me.
I mean, you got there.
I did eventually, and like ever since I read that book, I would go shopping, and I'm like, I'm buying these comics now because these are
Yeah,
really
man.
good. I like these. They're tasty, tasty comics.
Well, and like I really liked them because they let them really kind of explore some sillier ideas, which is was crazy for The Simpsons, but it was true. Like one of the big reasons I was really into them is the Bartman stuff. Like anytime there was anything about Bartman, I was definitely like I wanted to own it. And like so there's this entire like subsect in my fandom of The Simpsons that is based entirely on Bartman that I think he only shows up in the show like once. I think there's only one episode in which Bart is dressed up like him.
Yes, and
And
even from that, even from the Bartman thing, like when he became a superhero alter like ego in the show, it was Pie Boy, right? Like
right.
it was the sidekick to Homer being Pie Face, or like
So yeah, yeah. So like I have this entire like running love of this character from The Simpsons that honestly never was actually part of the show proper. So I'm sure there's an entire set of fans out there that don't even know what I'm talking about right now, right? Like, and so that it's just one of the great things that Bongo would
so.
do
Like
with
the
the
question I have to
Simpsons.
ask then, this is what I need. You've read When Bongos Collide, right? The 3 issue crossover that starts in Itchy and Scratchy, goes into The Simpsons, and finishes in Bartman.
No,
All right, cool.
I had no idea.
I think I figured out what I'm getting you for your birthday.
Oh man, that's
Because
amazing.
oh my god, that is. I'm not even gonna talk about it anymore. Like, happy birthday, Sejohn. Spoiler alert. Because that is collected in a trade paperback, and I was searching so hard because it is Bartman number 3, Itchy and Scratchy number 5, and Simpsons number 5. So it was like early on in the comic book run where they're
Hmm.
like, we're not going to be able to get away with this forever. There's no way we're going to be doing Bongo comics until like I have the 200th issue of the Simpsons comic books. Let's talk about it. And I went and I hunted it down.
Yeah.
They're like,
Oh man.
let's do whatever. I mean, you got the first issue of the Simpsons comics. Homer grows to 50 feet tall. Like, it's so good. They just do
Yeah.
such a good job in that. Oh, I love it. I absolutely love the Simpsons comics. And the thing that really does it for me, outside of all these other things that you mentioned, like because Bartman is fantastic,
Hmm.
and all that, is that Bart is wearing his blue shirt, and that is my like, oh my god, where's your blue shirt? And that's the craziest thing. Like you talk about licensed merchandising and like how to copy protect your merchandise, and they're
Yeah.
like, officially licensed Simpsons merchandise will have Bart in a blue shirt, and everybody's like, what? And they're like, everybody can do a red shirt, right? We'll do it in
Right.
blue. So like they already made their official stuff look kind of like knockoffs in a weird way. But that's why like in the Konami video game, Bart is wearing a blue shirt. And why in all of the comics Bart is wearing a blue shirt. and it's just like this ridiculous thing that they did, but it just makes me so happy. He looks better in blue. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Well, and you know what it is it's also them covering their bases in case anybody like essentially they're making it so that they can basically in perpetuity sue anybody that does anything with Bart ever,
Oh yeah,
right?
no, they're,
Like,
they're
yeah,
litigious. Let's talk
yeah,
about it.
yeah. Well, and so they're guaranteeing basically a literal spectrum of Barts that they can refer to, so that they can say, nope, looks like that one, so you can't use it, right? Like they're oh man, it's fantastic. Yeah, so like the Futurama stuff with Bongo too is really like going to be a sad thing. I mean, again, they haven't said that they're ending Futurama. I want to make that
To
clear,
be
but
fair,
I
they may
mean,
have already ended Futurama. I haven't read
that's
a
also
Futurama
true.
comic
Yeah.
since I think like issue 69 was the last one that I picked up.
Yeah. Well, and I was only really reading Futurama comics back before Futurama came back, where it was really kind of like it was basically like reading like new seasons because as far as we knew, we weren't going to ever get it again, right? And that for me was awesome because I mean, like one of the really good things that Bongo always did that I thought was great is I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this, but essentially, like, the way that Futurama and The Simpsons like play with a lot of television tropes, because being TV shows, there's a lot of parody of television style sci-fi in Futurama and
Pop culture in general is pretty much
well,
what The
pop culture in
Simpsons aimed
general,
at,
yeah.
but specifically
But
in
the
their
way
medium.
that,
Yeah,
but yes, but the way that they attack their medium head on with parody, right, is they allowed that sort of stuff to happen also in the comics, but against like the world, you know what I mean? Like, so they were two comics, and it was awesome, like seeing some of the ways that they would play with like Doctor Who and Star Trek comic style stories in Futurama were amazing. And like the one page like art was always really good, and there's just so much good stuff in the Futurama comics too. And yeah, I mean, like we were saying, I don't know how Bongo survives after Futurama ends. So like, I mean,
after
after
Simpsons
Simpsons
and
ends,
it's
yeah,
and it's sad because they really put their heart into it. Like I bought DuckTales comic books. Like I was very excited for the new show DuckTales comics,
yeah,
and it's literally like, oh, we just dropped in like sprites from the show.
yeah.
Like it's
Yeah,
like
there's an entire new world out there right now that Disney is on the forefront of, where they're called like Cinecomics, where they will literally just take cells from the cartoon and slap them into a frame on the page, and then just put a speech bubble over it. Like, so it is like you're saying, like straight up assets just taken straight from their shows, and they're doing it for like all of Gravity Falls. They're doing it for all of DuckTales, like anything that they think they can get away with this, and it's I don't know. I find it really lazy. Like if I was a kid, I'd probably fucking love it though. But like I just find it as an adult just upsetting because like you want that, I don't know, that work put into it.
yeah, exactly. You want it to be good. You want it to be new artwork. You want it to be something that adds to the show, not just borrowing from it. Like Transformers Animated, they did a book that like was the pilot, and also the Transformers movie did a book that was the movie, and it's literally just like storyboards with speech
Yeah.
bubbles, and it's like, well, that's not. I thought that we could like the best thing to point at here, and I know we talked about it last week, is the comic adaptation of the 1990s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie.
Yeah.
Because I got something stuck in my car. I need to watch it. That's really what I need to do. I'm going to like talk about it until I talk myself into rewatching the movie.
Yeah.
But the adaptation of that, I wound up with like 4 free copies of that. I went to go visit Mirage Studios in Northampton, which I don't know if it's there anymore, and to buy some books. And while I was there, the guy in charge of it's like, oh, while you're buying stuff, like we just have a bunch of this thing we're not really selling. So like, do you want some? Here's 4 copies of the comic book adaptation of the movie, which really is the only place to get any deleted scenes from that movie.
Yeah.
Like Angry
That's true.
Michelangelo
Oh
at the
man.
farmhouse, which is awesome. And
Wow.
like the end of it where April is pitching Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as a comic book.
That's amazing. I was gonna say, you know what, I really didn't need more time on the farm in the Ninja Turtles movie, but I would love to see a scene in which April is like breaking the fourth wall.
Yeah, it's with Danny. She goes with Danny to like a comic company. She's like, "What do you think?" And he's like, "It's so unbelievable." Meanwhile, the turtles watch on from the window outside.
Oh God,
It's
that's
just like,
amazing and creepy
what
and
a
perfect for that
ridiculous
movie.
thing. Like, and
Yeah.
it would have been great, but it's like, I don't know, but I don't think they could have built like they couldn't have done Secret of the Ooze if they had done a joke like that.
That's
And that's
true.
like the unfortunate like truth of it.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Oh
But
God.
that's fun. And you know what? You do kind of get some angry Michelangelo in the movie. There's that whole scene where like one of them is like just doing martial arts and then screams, and that's Michelangelo, but he doesn't get any words.
Oh
Like,
man.
well, April doesn't do a narration for him, is what the problem is. Where like he gets a full narration in this comic adaptation, and it's good because it's like the black and white turtles living in that world. I love that kind of stuff. I love additions in like supplemental comics and books as opposed to retreads. And I'm
Yeah.
just repeating myself. But I think the one thing that really upsets me is that they don't give canonicity. I'm going to call it canonicity to the comics from Bongo.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And that is
Um,
most represented in the Simpsons Futurama crossover crisis. Maybe not
right.
called that. Where they're like, they did like huge interviews about how you cross over the Simpsons with Futurama. And all of this stuff, and they're like, the most important thing to remember is Futurama is the real world and the Simpsons is a fictional world. And it's like, oh, okay, thank you, that's perfect. I really like that. I really like that. That's like the word of God from Matt Groening.
Right, right.
And then, like, obviously, if you haven't read it, this is not a spoiler. But if you, Sejohn, have you read these comics?
Yes, these ones I have read.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So the way that they cross over is brain spawn, which is beautiful because the Futurama are put into the fictional world of The Simpsons, and I love it, and I absolutely
Right.
love that. And it makes perfect sense. It exists within the world of Futurama. It exists within the realm of The Simpsons. Everything works. And then, and here's like the issue, like the big problem that I have with this, is Simpsorama happened. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, Futurama and The Simpsons are going to cross over in TV. And they have these 4 issues of comic books that lay out a perfect groundwork for that. And it'd be one thing, it would be one thing, if
Yeah.
they didn't borrow so much from them. Because they do. Because, like,
They do.
Lisa playing the hollow saxophone
Oh God.
is like, well, she plays a hollow phoner because we don't know of any other hollow instruments in the Futurama world. But yeah, okay, Lisa's playing a hollow saxophone because those exist now.
Yeah.
Thank you. But that's the whole way that it ends. Is she plays a holophoner and makes Kang and Kodo show up, and that's literally how Simpsorama ends. So it's like, so you guys read it, so you guys are familiar with it, like this is the thing.
You knew it existed and you're nodding to it. We get it.
And you're nodding to it, and that's fine. But they officially say in that, which is given more canon like shit than the comic book, that the Futurama is the future of The Simpsons. And that gets right under my skin, and I'm like, no, it can't be. And you know what? I would be completely all right with it if Fry and Leela and all of them had yellow skin. But no, they don't! They got their regular skin tones. So it's like, make it
man.
This really got under my skin. I'm going to be honest with you.
Well, because it weirdly establishes it in a way that The Simpsons must be so far in the past that we are talking like old world, right? Like prehistoric almost in a way, right? Like the idea being that at some point we completely looped back around and became the humans we are in Futurama, right? Because like you're saying, how did we get from The Simpsons to Futurama without just a complete total reset at some point, evolution-wise?
Right, and, I mean, like, other problems that I have with this are, we've seen things like Bender's Big Score, where he's going back in time, and nothing has yellow skin. We've seen things like the late Philip J. Fry, where we've seen the creation and destruction of the universe, that shows no yellow-skinned people.
Right. Well, and then on top of that, we've also seen tons and tons of like merchandise for The Simpsons in Futurama. Like if they ever need to fill a joke on a page, all they have to do is make fun of The Simpsons. We see Bart toys, we see Bart T-shirts.
Yeah, when they go to the big ball of trash.
Yeah,
eat
right,
my shorts. Okay.
Right. So like we also know that at some point, like unless The Simpsons is to them like dinosaurs, you know, Jim Henson's dinosaurs. Whereas like it is like a look back at a pastime maybe that existed in a way, but like very super fictionalized maybe.
Yeah. It bothers me. It bothers me so much. Like, not like I can sleep at night. It's not one of those things where like I can't sleep at night because oh my god,
Well, I
Futurama.
never will again. Now
Oh,
I'm
I'm
sitting
sorry.
here
I'm
trying to
sorry.
figure out how to link.
I can't bring the two together, Devon. No, it just gets under my skin because I mean, like everything that Futurama established is suddenly undone when that episode of The Simpsons comes along. Like not just the comics, but even the show Futurama. Like it'd be one thing like all they have to do is like it's a separate dimension and they're dimension crossing monsters or like anything that they could have done, but
Well, I
instead
mean,
they write it off as look how yellow their skin is. They
yeah.
must be jaundiced. Like
Right, it's just a throwaway joke and then
yeah,
never referenced again. Where, yeah, I mean, well, and part of that is like you have to. I imagine the guys that are writing for Simpsons comics and writing for Futurama comics, right? Like these are people that are dedicated to their fandom of these shows, right? Like there's like you don't work on these comics, these particular comics without a particular love for them, right? Because they're not bestsellers. There's a reason Simpson comics are ending despite the show still going strong, right? Like there so in a way, it almost feels like the guys that are writing the comics have more of a reverence for it sometimes than the guys that were doing the television show. You know, and I won't ever say that about Futurama because it was canceled and brought back so many times that every second those guys were working on it, they were putting everything they could into it before they got taken away again. You know, but Simpsons for sure has definitely dipped in and out of like phoning it in, shall we say, right? And I never felt that in any of the comics because it was always written by these super nerds that like loved the property so much versus these guys that were just cranking out episodes of television at some point because Fox just had a chain around their ankle, right? Like it just there's a love behind the comics that I don't always feel in the show anymore, and I think that might be the saddest part for me is that like what I love of The Simpsons from like, you know, seasons 7 and 8 and 9 and all and back in the day, like I still feel that when I pick up a Simpsons comic. I don't feel that when I watch a Simpsons episode anymore.
yeah, it's sort of a weird thing where like it's fans creating it now. Like I
Mm,
find it hard to believe that anybody who works in the Simpsons writing room now didn't grow up with The Simpsons as part of their point of reference for comedy and animation.
right. I mean, it almost feels like it's got to be a requirement. Like to write for The Simpsons nowadays, you need to have a good solid like history with the show, right?
And it sort of becomes those things where like as a fan of the show, this is something that I like, so this is something that I want to highlight. It's like with the Monkey Island games when it wasn't Ron Gilbert doing them anymore.
Yeah.
Like Curse of Monkey Island, like why would you reintroduce insult sword fighting? Like it works in the first game, and it's like, oh, I loved it. Let's put it back in this game now that we're in control of it. It sort of is like licensed fan fiction in a way, and
Yeah.
and it's not that like the comics are not licensed fan fiction as well. I mean, honestly, any show licensed fan fiction is a really slippery slope term
Oh yeah.
because every show eventually becomes that, right? Like just
If it's
because.
around too long, sure, yeah.
Well,
I
no,
mean, take a
no.
look at
I mean,
something like take a look at something like Supernatural, a show that its later seasons have been completely dictated by fandom and is now being run by people that like, yeah. I mean, there's all sorts of infamous examples of this.
yeah, it's just one of those things. But like the type of people who are writing comic books for The Simpsons, you're right. They're the kind of people who like I have a reverence for this. They're the kind of people who go meet the voice of Itchy and Scratchy and say, in episode this, he strikes the same bone, creating two separate tones. Why?
Yeah. Why? Oh
All
man.
right, let's
Yeah. No. Exactly.
any other things to say on The Simpsons? Because I feel like we've beaten this horse already
No.
to death.
No. No. Yeah. We have flown this cat to the moon and blown its head up twice. So let's end this thing.
Yeah. So that's The Simpsons. Go read the comics because apparently they're ending. I'm sad now. You made
Yep.
me say it. What else is
Well,
going
let's
on
talk
in your
about
life?
something happy. No, let's talk about something happy then. I've actually, man, so the big thing that I'm super excited about E3 this year that it seems like not many people are talking about is like for the first time in a long time, I think THQ is back, baby.
Are we
Man,
talking about E3?
yeah, well, there's a whole bunch of like new video game stuff and then Comic-Con stuff that's come out over the last couple of weeks and as is the case over the last few years, the news is not like a single burst of stuff coming out. It starts like 2 weeks beforehand and keeps running about 2 weeks after these events nowadays. Like it used to be that if you wanted to know what was going on at Comic-Con, you had to pay attention for these 4 days, and then would basically get everything that happened at Comic-Con in those 4 days. That's not the case anymore, right? Like if you're not paying attention from a month ahead of time to a month afterwards, like you're missing all sorts of weird like little things that are slipping out in phone videos and interviews that happen and all this other stuff. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of E3 stuff still kind of trickling out here or there. And the big thing that I was super excited about was like there was actual footage for a new Darksiders game at E3.
Oh, you mean Fury? The Fury
Well, yeah,
game, which is
yeah,
not one
Fury.
of the Four Horsemen. So like,
Hmm.
and,
Well, eh, it depends on it depends on what your it depends on like what your lore is that you're going for
oh, I'm
because
sorry.
Fury does frequently show up as a four horseman in like not theologically based info. Like I think like Christopher Moore wrote a book in which Fury was one. I think that like I'm pretty sure Good Omens features a horse named Fury. But anyway, you're right that it is not like set in stone like the actual biblical lore though, right? And that's I would take that critique if I hadn't already played the other two Darksiders games, and they go buck wild with that sort of information. Like the stories that they are telling in those games are both some of my favorite stories in all of video games. You know, in all of like dumb fan like fiction, not fan fiction, in all of like dumb fantasy fiction. You know, like there's some of my favorite fantasy storylines ever, but they are also so completely batshit insane. It's basically it is to the Bible what God of War was to Greek mythology, right? Like like it's like okay, you're taking basically the parts you like and you're just stringing it together in different ways than the actual stories. So I'm totally fine. It is the moral of the story with the idea of it being Fury,
I
and then I
just want
believe
there to be a joke where they're like, "Oh, pestilence! You know what? Come with some fury now."
well, and I think the fourth horseman in this particular series is Strife, which I don't think I've ever heard referenced as a
Yeah,
horse.
that's
Yeah,
strange.
so like Fury and Strife are the last two. Well, and I think part of that might be the idea that they definitely want to try and back away from any type of religious like what do you want to call it? They just want to make sure that they're not going to piss anybody off, right? So like the less that they can attach themselves to a very particular religious story, the better off they probably are going to be, right? You know, and not to say that like religious like in games. I mean, I'm talking about
You're
that
slipping
stuff, but
out.
also
Yep. You have to say what you just said again because you were all meh, meh, meh.
oh, and not to say that like religious like iconography can't be in video games because like I mean, we see that all the time. I just mentioned the God of War, right? But also you see, I mean, we see like angels and demons all the time in these games. So like, I don't think that they're playing with anything too dangerous. I just think that it's probably smart of them to not like hook their horse, as it were, to this particular wagon, right? So like anything they can do to differentiate themselves from like Catholicism, Christianity, and all that stuff is probably good.
Well, it's not the
Um,
NES where like, yeah, you can't even show crosses in games. Like, I
right,
don't know
right.
how Castlevania happened with that. Like, you can't say the word God. Okay, but how about this?
Yeah, right.
Vampire God.
Yeah, essentially they a lot of illusory dialogue and stuff in those
Yeah.
games, right? Um, but yeah, so
So THQ is
Darksiders.
back. What would you say THQ's last good game was if they're back? If they went away, there had to have been a time when they stepped away. What is that in
Well,
your
so
estimation?
well, it's not that they stepped away, man. They straight up like dissolved and sold off. Like THQ, the story of THQ is actually like one of the most like upsetting and like unfortunate stories ever for a video game company. You know, like they were one step below AAA when they existed, right? Like they started back in the 90s and THQ is toy headquarters, and they started off as like an actual like toy company, and they just happened to have a video game arm that was, because it was the early 90s. Every toy company started to look into what these newfangled digital things were going to be like, right? And so they had a video game arm, and they realized pretty intelligently, like they saw what was coming down the line, and they were like, physical toy stores probably can't last, but this video game thing looks like it might be around for a while. So like by the mid 90s, they had basically shut down the physical arm of their entire company, save for like special editions of things and stuff like that. So they basically became just a video game company by the end of the 90s, but they still called themselves toy headquarters. And like I think that actually helped them last a little bit longer than they would have otherwise, because I mean, early 2000 is when you start to see like the fall of like KB Toys and stuff, right? And I don't know if they would have lasted that onslaught. So like that was a pretty smart move on their part, and they did some pretty awesome stuff. They had the Red Faction games, they had the Destroy All Human games, but the big ones for them, for me, will always forever be the Darksiders, like, well, now trilogy, and what will hopefully eventually be a saga. Like the very first Darksiders game just completely got me. Like it wasn't the kind of game that I ever would have thought about looking at or playing, because when it was marketed, when it was shown, it was always approached as a God of War like first third person action game with some intense like button fighting sequence type stuff. A lot of it catches a lot of slack because it relies pretty heavily on some quick time event style stuff. Not nearly as much as God of War, but I think that there's some really cool stuff in the combat. I really like there's like the quick executions that happen if you beat up a guy enough. You get the choice to actually quick execute them, and that gives you different bonuses as opposed to just completely just demolishing them. So like if you think about it, the way that they build the systems in the game are really interesting. If you really are thinking about it, you're like, oh, I'm really friggin' low on health, but I know that if I equip this very particular weapon and I do quick executes with it, it actually gives me health. So like I will just go around and just like shank some dudes for a while and regain all that. So like really intelligent ways that works there. Going back, and I'm actually replaying it right now, the very first Darksiders game, because of all of this news. And going back and playing it now, there's definitely a lot of archaic stuff to it. It's oversimplified. We've seen this like the system like really kind of pushed further and further. So I'm excited to see what they do with a new one, because I love the systems that were there, and I remember there's a very particular boss fight in the first one where you fight the giant sandworms. Mm-hmm. That is like iconic to me. Like it was the first time in a long time that I had done a boss battle that actually like was cool, because the whole point in that one is you just have gotten your horse back. You have finally gotten oh, what's his name? It's like Pain or something ridiculously awesome, like Todd McFarlane nonsense. Ruin, that's his name. Your horse's name is Ruin. Epona, your horse's name is Epona.
Epona. Well, I've been waiting for a break in the conversation so I could say that Darksiders is one of the only 3D Zelda games I've completed.
Well, that's the big thing about it, right? Is it was pitched as this whole like third person action game, but secretly what it was actually very heavily influenced by was things like Ocarina of Time and things like that. The idea of going into dungeons, collecting an item, and then using that item to navigate through in new ways, and then on top of that, also usually to kill the boss of the thing, right? There's also one of my favorite things about the Darksiders series that I hadn't really seen yet in a Zelda game. Not true sense, but the idea of the evolution of a puzzle. So you go through a room one way first, and it gets you to a tool, and then you pick up that tool, and then you actually have to backtrack through that puzzle again. But now that you've got the tool, there's actually a new way to solve the puzzle that gives you a new solution. So like the idea that it's the same puzzle, but now there's a new way to go through it, and is like the way that they build on that stuff in the Darksiders series is always amazing to me. And one of the coolest things about that is the art style and the visual style of the whole thing, and the way that it evolves with the puzzle. So like anybody that's never even looked at this thing, first of all, just go check out some of the artwork, because if you really loved like metal CD covers in the 90s, it's like this is the artwork for you. I was not kidding with the Todd McFarlane stuff. I think I've straight up have like sketches somewhere from Todd McFarlane actually helping draw some of these characters and creating some of these characters. They just straight out of Spawn, and that sort of stuff. And so you see these big hulking dudes with giant armor pieces on. Actually the design for Death from Darksiders 2 is one of my that's some of my favorite artwork in the whole game, in the whole series. But anyway, yeah. So like going through and seeing the artwork evolve and seeing the puzzles evolve, and also you like being able to like build your character in the way that you can, and then you add to that the Zelda elements, right? Going back and finding new rooms in temples that you've already been through, but now you're collecting better gear and better armor and all that stuff. It got me, right? And the killer was Darksiders 2 coming out and being a completely different game.
Yeah,
Like,
that was going to be my next critique. Was I
yeah,
friggin' loved the first Darksiders.
yeah,
I platinumed it. I played
yeah,
that
yeah.
game to death. And then like Darksiders 2, they're like, it's gonna be like Darksiders, but you can craft gear. And I'm like, that's cool. Like if that's gonna be the only change, that's cool. And then I loaded up and I'm like, this is like Skyrim. I fucking hate
No, yeah, no,
Skyrim.
no. It is a completely different game. Skyrim, you know what I've actually come to realize it really is? It is Breath of the Wild before Breath of the like 15 years prior.
Yeah, I was about to
Like
make
playing
that
that game.
connection when I made the
Yeah.
Zelda reference. I'm like, oh, it's Breath of the Wild. Maybe I could go back and beat Darksiders 2
Yeah,
now that I've like muscled through Breath of the Wild.
yeah, like there you play it now and looking back on it, you're just like, man, there's a lot of stuff that they did to evolve the idea of the Zelda game that Breath of the Wild actually ended up using. And I don't, God knows what's referencing what and all that sort of stuff, but like I actually think that Darksiders 2 ends up actually being a much better game than I can't tell what the read is on this game because people love this game and I really enjoy it, and I think I might like it better than the first one. It's actually hard for me to pick between the two because they are so different. It basically becomes comparing apples and oranges, right? Because like it's an open world game. I love the weapon system in the second game. The idea of feeding weaker weapons to your stronger ones in order to make it like it was the first game I'd ever played where you did something like that. I know it's not the first game out there that ever employed that mechanic, but it was the first time that I had ever really paid attention to systems, and it's a much more of a game about systems than the first one is. Um, I, I just I never had really gotten into that sort of gaming before, and that one dragged me in too, man. So like the Darksiders games were always huge to me. So yeah, so THQ is going along, chugging along, and making these awesome games, right? And then 2008 comes around, and the rug gets pulled out from under the world, right? Like a lot of things start to happen. We end up going into our financial crisis here in the States, and honestly two things killed THQ, and one of them was the financial crisis of 2008. Just people weren't buying these B rare like tier games anymore because that was the big thing for THQ is they were so awesomely solidly B tier, right? Like they were putting out the Saints Row series and all that sort of stuff. Like and they were making money on these games, but they were not AAA, and I don't think they ever wanted to be. Like they didn't want to be putting $1 billion behind a Halo game, praying to God that it sold, right? Like that's just not what they wanted to do. So instead, we got awesome things like Saints Row the Third and Darksiders and all this other weird
Games
stuff
that
that they
like
were.
had
Red
care
Faction
behind
Umbrella,
them.
right?
Like I have a friend who just picked up Call of Duty World War II, and he's like, I waited. I don't buy games new, and I bought it, and he's like, I'm done with it already.
Yeah,
I've played it for a week.
yeah,
And it's like, yeah, I mean, Darksiders, I played a long time. Darksiders 2, I think if it had grabbed me the same way the first one did, like
yeah.
that really alienated me. Like I
Oh, it did a
felt,
lot of people. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and I never went back to it. And that was
Hmm.
also in this time where I was just buying games. It
Hmm.
was in the reason why Toys R Us shut down phase. It was Devon
Yeah,
Decker
yeah,
personally
yeah,
attacking Toys R Us by buying a new
yeah.
game, getting a $30 gift card with that game, and then using that $30 gift card to get another game and getting a $30 gift card with it.
Hmm.
Like single handedly, man.
Yeah.
Like that's what did it. I was. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry.
Sorry,
We all have to
Jeffrey.
grow up.
Oh, yeah. So like THQ, like it just starts to kind of fall apart on them, and so the thing is that a company like that I love for the weird stuff that they can do. Unfortunately, the other thing that brought them down was that weird stuff. They invested in a game called Homefront. Do you remember anything about Homefront,
I
man?
remember that the cover is a guy with a blindfold on that has a circle and a star on it. The
Uh,
blindfold is orange.
I think now if you go back and buy it, I think it's actually an American flag blindfold or something. Just to make it even more insanely stupid nationalistic. The game is insane, Devon. Homefront a lot of people ended up giving it pretty like mid-level ratings, right? Like it ends up being kind of like a 6 out of 10 for a lot of people, right? And I think that that is too much.
You think that a
um,
6 is too much?
yeah, I think a 6 is too much, man. I hated the Homefront games because there is now a second one out there that came out a couple of years ago and it was just as bad. But the Homefront games, the big thing for me about them that really kind of rubs me the wrong way is actually the history of them. When the game first started out, it was already a problem. They wanted to make a Red Dawn style story, right? But they were making it in 2010 or 2011, and we don't have big bads anymore, right? Like we understand now that like people are not necessarily always represented well by their leaders and that sort of thing. So like we have problems with countries out there. For instance, people that have issues with Putin. I don't think that many of them nowadays would say like screw the Russians. I think what they really hate, like there's a very specific sect of people that they are angry at, right? And I think that is because we've become smarter as humans. We don't look. It's the same reason that like you don't just say like, oh, these Middle Eastern guys are the bad guy in this movie. Now you give people like a very specific reason to be the bad guy in a movie, right? Like
You're not
I
wrong.
don't.
You're not wrong.
Right,
It's just
right.
very. I don't know. They said that was an outdated trope in something I was watching, is like vilifying an entire nation, and I'm
Right.
like, yeah, but at the same time, like that's what was happening. Like then they reference like movies that took place during World War II, and they're like, we're gonna kill a lot of Germans, and I'm like, yeah, but that's how they talked in World War II. It'd
Well,
be
right.
weird
And if there's
if
a if
those
there's
guys
a
differentiated.
well, unlike everything in life, it comes down to context, right?
Yeah.
And
Well,
so the context of these games was, hey, how about it's 2018 and we just look at all of China as the bad guys, just China. No, like the idea is that China as a country has taken over all of America and they're the bad guys. And smartly, somebody in the room eventually said, you know, guys, this probably isn't the best idea. Like looking at an entire like section of the world and saying, hey, these guys are the bad guys, especially because that large section of the world probably will do things like ban our video game. And all that other stuff. And so they scrambled at the last minute to take all of the references to communist Chinese like dictatorships and all this other stuff out and how they had taken over America and like scrambled to figure out what to do with that story. And like I'm not saying that I wish they preferred they stuck with that because that's just horrible. I wish that they had been smart enough early on to not ever approach that angle because what they end up doing is they end up doing this thing called Unified Korea is like the bad guy in the Homefront series, and the idea is that North Korea casually made things great with South Korea again. I can't remember if it's just like a straight up takeover or if they actually figured out diplomatically how to get South Korea back or something. But they become a unified Korea, and then from there they grow and take over. And that's not any better, really. Also, there's a lot of weird stuff to that too, and the idea of like a unified Korea that like completely
if they
steps
could
on a lot
ever
of history.
unify themselves, they would take over the world.
Yeah, yeah,
It's like
exactly. Right. Yeah, there's a lot of issues with the story itself, right? And then on top of that, the game itself can be 5 hours long if you play it. If you're one of those types of people that just like I'm just going to streamline some stuff and not pay attention to too much else, and even if you are that kind of person who likes to just stop and smell the roses in games like that, you're only looking at like 10 hours. And I hate those kinds of games. And I know that that's like every Call of Duty and Battlefield right now is like 10-hour campaign and then the rest is all of the multiplayer, which is exactly what they were kind of going for. But like that, and maybe that's my big problem with it, is that like that's just not what THQ did. They didn't ever just go for that type of shit. Like they always wanted to do something a little off, a little strange, a little weird. And if the strange part of Homefront was going to just be its narrative, that's disappointing and upsetting, especially considering how much I love things like the narrative in the Darksiders games. And I mean even in the stupid games that they have like De Blob and like Red Faction, like I love like the little goofy stories that go on in those types of games just to give you a reason to destroy shit in the world, right? Like but it's at least enough to keep you going. So like Homefront was just disappointing on just so many levels for me, right? And sales wise for them, like just didn't do anything. it only made like $1 million, I think, in its whole run. Maybe about 2 million, but when all is said and done after all these years. But like, it just didn't go anywhere for them. So in the middle of a financial crisis, they went and they pooped out this like shitty game, and THQ for the first time, it felt like in forever, like made some bad decisions, and they had to sell off everything in 2013. So they straight up didn't exist. And it's one of the first big like major video game like news events that I remember ever actually being super invested in, because I mean, at that point, like we didn't know if we were ever going to see another Saints Row again. I thought I was basically convinced that was the end for Darksiders. Like they were always promising 4 games to do each of the Horsemen, but they never had really announced much in terms of plans for a Darksiders 3 yet. And then all of a sudden now they weren't going to exist anymore. So I was pretty convinced we were never going to get the end of this story. And then like there was a whole bunch of other stuff that they were just like, what are we going to do with all this? And at first they tried to sell the one company as a whole, and then that wasn't allowed legally, so they had to sell off bit by bit. And then listening to the auction of THQ was just like heartbreaking. But eventually, like these dudes up in Sweden like bought up a bunch of the THQ games. Nordic Games, it was the name of the company, bought up a bunch of THQ games, and they are back now as THQ Nordic. And they're just like, they're going out and buying a bunch of THQ stuff back, and they're just like, we're gonna make some games. They bought back the Saints Row stuff from wherever that had gone off to, along with Deep Silver and all that stuff, and they're just they're just making THQ games again, and I'm super excited.
So I have one question through all this. Who are
Yeah.
the 3 countries that unify in Red Dawn to invade the U.S.? I know it's Russia and Nicaragua. I can't remember the third.
Canada, isn't it Canada?
No, it's not Canada.
I actually, for the life of me, cannot remember. Up until this moment, I was just I didn't realize that it was not just Russia in Red Dawn. Now, granted, I have not seen original Red Dawn in like since I was like
In forever,
11.
right? Like that's the
Right?
thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's like, because one of the biggest issues in Red Dawn is it's like, so these 3 people put aside their differences to be like, let's invade the U.S. today. And one of them is
Right,
Nicaragua. And it's like, yeah, I understand Iran-Contra is going on Red Dawn, and you're like, ripped from the headlines.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
but like, is that like, it might be Russia, China, and Nicaragua. Like that, like now that I'm thinking about it, and like, because there are communists in the
Right,
80s.
exactly. Yeah.
So I could totally see that being it. But it's just one of those things where it's like, if it were just the Russians, you'd have me Red Dawn. But this like unified event that is what starts Red Dawn, that's the problem that I have with Red Dawn.
And it's a tricky trope to kind of deal with if you're talking about the real world, right? Like the entire country like deciding to invade us. That it's not that weird of a story. It's any invasion film ever, right? But the idea of it having to be Russia, right? And being like, oh, well, let's make this a little crazier so that people don't get mad. You know what I mean? Like you almost want to do something as weird as Nicaragua, China, and Russia have to come to an agreement to all team up against America, which is ridiculous, right? But that's exactly why you do that, is so that people can't like accuse you of like baiting them into, like,
right, it's
like
diffusion. It's 100% diffusion.
But also at the same time, like you're saying, it can't be so unbelievable that like you as an audience member just can't buy into it, right? Like it needs to be believable in a way, which is one of the things that, again, I just don't find at all in any of the Homefront stuff. And I'm sure other people out there feel differently about it. I'm sure you could find somebody out there that thinks that the story is like gold and probably wrote a dissertation on it. But anyway, it is what it is. Like I don't think you can argue that Homefront was the thing that kind of tanked THQ's chances of surviving the financial crisis. Like they were hanging by a thread, and then that came along and just cut it.
And to be fair, I think one of the other reasons that cut it is the game that was big at that time was the wartime shooter. So like THQ, in a bid to save itself, decides to kowtow to AAA interests.
Yeah, that's true. The cynical side of you could definitely pull that evidence, and I mean, like they were just trying to do anything they could to stay afloat, and so they went under because they sold out. That's but that's the cynic in me, and I don't want to hold them to that.
You don't want to like that. We're trying to be a positive show. This has to be a positive environment, but it is like you can sort of look at it, and it's one of those things that like now they're getting back to their bread and butter stuff. They're doing like Saints Row with. Were they Agents of Mayhem? or not that.
I don't know if they had I don't know if they had those guys yet at the time that Agents of Mayhem was made. I think that the acquisition for that stuff was only in the last couple of years, and Agents of Mayhem is probably 3 years old at this point, right?
Agents of Mayhem came out last year.
Last year,
Yeah.
man. Well, maybe. I mean, development cycles are long.
Are
so,
long. So that's the other issue. But yeah, that's my question, because that game's great. That game is everything about Saints Row, but like you're painted as a hero.
That's awesome. Yeah. Probably why it didn't sell so well, though. Nobody ever wants to be the hero in those types of games.
Also, it's kind of a rush job. I will say that I enjoy that game immensely, but it feels sort of rushed. You know what the other issue is? And this is weird. Choice sort of ruins video games for a lot of people. And you have 15 playable characters in that game, and you build a 3-player team. And it's like, every time I get a new guy, I'm like, you're cool, but I like already invested in these other people.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing. Red Dead Revolver, right? Like, we're going all the way back to Red Dead Revolver time. You play as 7 different people, and one of them is the Native American guy with the bow and arrow. There's a lady with a bow and arrow. She's the 4th character that you get. I can kill everybody with a headshot because I've played Red Dead Revolver so many times where I can kill everybody with a headshot with that guy's bow and arrow. So, like, I switched out the dude who moved slowly and, like, was only melee attacks for her. And I'm like, yeah, no, this game, these are my guys now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, like, that's always a problem with those types of games, is that if you don't give people the choice fast enough, then they've already made it, right? And so, but also you don't want to overload. So again, hard balances, right? But yeah, I would probably wager that they probably weren't involved with that one. But whatever's coming next is probably going to be wholly backed by them, because they seem to just really love the idea of just like really boosting this THQ stuff, you know. And Nordic Games was around long before they became THQ Nordic, but they just happened to just pull this move where I think they're attempting something pretty wild, like the idea of trying to maybe bring back like the B tier game for whatever reason. Like, I kind of hope it works, but also at the same time, like the fall of the B tier game is what gave rise to the indie game. So like I kind of wasn't missing it. I didn't think I was, but maybe they'll prove me wrong. You know, and Darksiders 3 is a hell of a way to get me interested. So
I don't know. I'm gonna have to see before. I don't want to jump in and have another Darksiders 2 experience.
Oh well, I mean, I think the idea is that it is going to be a completely different game. So I'll just warn you now, like than Darksiders 1 or Darksiders 2. So
I'm fine with that because I didn't like Darksiders 2.
Yeah.
So I want to witness what it's like.
Yeah, I'm curious to know what kind of game it's going to be, because the only thing I've actually heard in terms of gameplay is actually Darksiders 4. The idea of Strife, and I don't know if this is just a fan theory or actually somebody at THQ actually said this, THQ Nordic actually said this, but the idea of that one being much more based in like a Devil May Cry style of game, where you're really just going around and really it's just all about like long combat combos, like double gun type stuff. Gun kata, isn't that the stuff from
John Wick?
No, although also that would be amazing. No, I believe Gun Kata is actually the name of the fighting style created for Equilibrium, the Christian Bale gun
Equilibrium
sword
reference.
Yeah, Fahrenheit 451 in space or whatever it is in the future. I mean,
no, Equilibrium is Brave New World, like without a doubt.
It is
because they take that daily drug. It's Soma.
They also take a daily drug.
Wait! I looked it up in friggin' what's it called?
It is story beat for story beat. Like straight up to the televisions on the wall that people are like dragged into. It is beat for beat Fahrenheit 451. There is probably also Brave New World stuff in there as well, but even the moment where the girl next door that he's been kind of getting suddenly disappears with her family, like everything about it. He keeps a stash of books that he reads. He has to kill a friend in the beginning because he's been stealing books. Like everything is straight out of Fahrenheit 451. They just add gunplay.
Okay, so here's the really interesting. First of all, I looked it up in the Leonard Maltin app because I was bored. And he says, writer-director presents a warmed-over rehash of 1984, Brave New World, and Fahrenheit 451. Now, of those 3 books, my book is Brave New World. I friggin' love Brave New World. Yours is clearly Fahrenheit 451. Because you watch that movie and you're like, oh, this is Fahrenheit 451. And I watch the movie and I'm like, oh, this is Brave New World. And that's hilarious. That's hilarious. That Equilibrium can bring that out of us.
Yeah, well, and somebody out there is thinking 1984, and that person's an asshole.
No, 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 no. I mean, the TV is like right there, Big Brother. Like, let's just talk
yeah.
about it. But yeah, you are an asshole, 1984 guy. Gonna
But
send you to room 101.
yeah, yeah. So if that's where they're gonna go with Darksiders 4, like I totally get that. Like, why would you not do that style of game at some point in this art style and in this world? Makes total sense. But yeah, I'm really interested to see what the next one is. Like, I hope it's like an Animal Crossing style game. Like, you just have to farm land with Fury for 20 hours, and then you can go ahead and free your brother. I just gotta collect those bugs, man. Gotta stack those demon bugs. Yeah, I'm just super excited because this company that I knew and loved and was gone for, I mean they did it to themselves in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But
No, not even.
I mean, but as much as they did it to themselves, I also feel like, they did get the raw end of the stick in just the financial crisis and all that too, right? Like, I it's weird because at the end of the day they're just a friggin' company. That's the other big thing, is like that side of me that's like wants to fight capitalist power is also just like stop talking about them like they were a long lost relative, which is, it is what it is. I'm just excited to see video games I love coming back. And kind of like we were talking about with the Bongo comic stuff, like we're also talking about people that were clearly fans of this stuff. Like they went after this stuff because they knew that it was something worth going after. These were people that had a choice in picking up Darksiders and running with it. These weren't just guys that were just sitting in a room somewhere and somebody came to them and said, Activision didn't come down and say to them, like, mandate, like Darksiders 4, 5, and 6, start on it now. Like, that's just not what happened. These are guys that went out there and looked for this. So I'm excited because it's fans coming back to a thing that I love and generating more content for it. So good shit, man.
Excellent. And now that you've done this and eaten up all the time, I only have like 4 minutes to talk about WarioWare Gold.
Oh,
I'm going to use it because WarioWare Gold is excellent. That's pretty much all I got. I don't know. How many have you done any WarioWare?
I love WarioWare, but I didn't know about WarioWare Gold. WarioWare games, though, it was basically the proof of concept for the Wii U for me was the Wario game on Wii U.
Really? I've never. That's the only one I've never played. To be completely honest with you, Game and Wario.
Flip them francs.
Flip them francs.
No, there was a. Yeah, the Wario. It was one of the very first ones to come out on the system, right?
And it had Wii the whole. Or Wii U? Do you mean? No,
I mean the Wii U.
I think you mean.
I mean the Wii U. No, I mean the Wii U because you needed to use the screen to flip the francs.
Oh my god! First of all, I don't know that. And actually, in the WarioWare community, a lot of people say that that's not a true WarioWare game because it's not micro games; it's mini games. Which, like, a crazy distinction, but like a WarioWare game is here's 100 little 5 second
here's 100
games.
Little 5 second games that you got to kind of like fine, if you want to be like that, then be like that. This is the same kind of people out there that are like, Super Smash Brothers isn't a real fighting game.
Oh no, that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to be that person. I'm just saying that like it's weird to me that like that's your go-to. It's also kind of cool. It's just like fuck the community, right? The communities ruin everything. I'm going to be honest with you. Like, I look back at, like, a younger Devon, like, 2 years ago, like, oh, man, these communities are so cool. And then as I watch them, I'm like, man, being part of a community takes all the fun out of this stuff. Because they want to gatekeep, and they want things to only be their way.
Oh, yeah, man. Like, for sure. Gatekeeping is definitely one of the biggest issues when you get into these fandoms.
And, like, and that's the thing. So, like, if you enjoy Game & Wario, good for you. That's exciting. I've never played it. And I don't have a Wii U anymore. But all I know is that, like, WarioWare Smooth Moves on the Wii, I'm like, you're fun, but you're not really WarioWare. Like, I enjoyed you. I beat you, but...
Yeah.
I want to get back to, like, what WarioWare was for me the first time I played WarioWare on my Game Boy Advance in 2003.
Yeah.
And I really dig, like, this game. Everybody's like, it's just a compilation of all the games that came before. And yes, a lot of it is games that you played before, but there are some new ones. But the thing that really works is, you ever WarioWare Twisted, which is the second game that came out in the world, but it didn't come out in America for like years.
That's the one that had the altimeter or whatever it is on it, right? Where like you could twist the whole system. Oh yeah, man.
Yeah, that one.
I love that one.
I hated that one But I only
Really?
hated that one because like by the time it came out in America, everybody had Game Boy Advance SPs, and
Hmm.
that one was very much built for the original Game Boy Advance, like balance wise. Like it just didn't work the same way in a Game Boy Advance SP
Okay.
because
Okay. Okay.
it was narrow, and also like that altimeter is huge. Like it's this large
Yeah.
thing that like hangs off where like it was actually like they did a good job designing it for the original Game Boy Advance.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
horizontal
I forget
one.
what they called that thing, like the gyro something. There was
Yeah,
like because they had one for they had a Kirby pinball one that
that
used
had
that
that
one
as
as
well. Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a great thing. So now playing it on the 3DS, which has built-in like scopes, like all those games feel like they work for the first time.
Excellent.
And so
Yeah.
it's and it's that same form factor. It's been great. I beat it last night. Oh no, I beat it yesterday morning. Let's be completely
Yeah.
honest. Got it Friday, beat it yesterday, and I'm still doing challenges and stuff. So
Well,
if
that
you
was always the
haven't,
best thing about it, right? Was going back.
oh yeah, it's a perfect travel game. So if you haven't like been to the world of WarioWare since 2003, or you were there at Game and Wario, and you have a 3DS, go and try this game. It's fantastic. And the best part, and I'm not even kidding about this, all
Mm-hmm.
friggin' full voice acted cutscenes. So all these characters that you've known and loved, if you've been playing the games, finally have voices,
That's
and
amazing.
none of the voices are like, "Oh, you're terrible." All the voices are like, "It's perfect. This is sort of how I thought you sounded."
Oh, that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
so cool. Yeah, and like Game and Wario, man, I can't even begin to tell you like when Wii U came out, I it was already kind of in a weird place with everybody, and there was very few games that really kind of hooked me. Nintendo Land just didn't do it for me. Game and Wario became basically like the Wii Sports of the Wii U for me. Like that was the thing where I was like, oh, that's how the system works, and that's how the system can be fun to like pass around and play with. So, I
Do you still have a
I
Wii U and Game and
I'm
Wario?
excited. No, no,
Oh.
we upgraded with the Wii U to the Switch. Hopefully though, we will have a Wario game soon on there because I think there's news of one, right?
Oh, dude, I don't see. I mean, here's the thing: either they port WarioWare Gold over with like added stuff, like they did with Micro Mega Games Party Mix
Mm.
to for the GameCube, or they do a whole new one. But I would be completely fine if they took Gold as like a proof of concept, and then we're like, and now here's this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, man.
Cause, yeah, because it works. It works in 100 different ways. Even if it's just mashes, like people doing the mash ones on the Joy Cons would be perfect. So I hope so. I hope there's more. I love fucking WarioWare. There are
It's one of the
games
few
that.
places I can get my Waluigi fix.
Oh, he's not in that game.
Yeah, I know. He's not in. He is in very few games. Nintendo,
Are you really one of those people who like I love Waluigi?
hear my wah.
Nah, that's cool. I mean, I get it. It'd be nice if you got a game, right? Let's give Waluigi a game. Here's the big one. Like, there's like this rumor going around of the new Super Mario Brothers game that's going to be coming out for the Switch, and they're like, yeah, and it'll be Mario, Luigi, Blue Toad, and for the first time Wario. And it's like you could have just made Blue Toad Waluigi, right? Like no
Nope,
one would.
nope. They can't do that because everybody wants to shit on Waluigi. Here's the thing. I don't know if you figured this out yet, viewers at home and Devon yourself, but I love like stupid decisions. Stupid decisions that play out well are some of my favorite like happy accidents in the world. Stupid decisions that don't play out well are also fun though. So like I don't care if it works or not. I just want to see somebody try it, right? And it kills me that Nintendo has not just tried to do something with Waluigi because other than playing him in like sports games, like you don't really get to do much with him. I think he shows up as an assist trophy in Smash Brothers, right? Like he's not even a character
It's
there.
crazy that he's not a character in Smash Brothers. I will be the
Exactly.
first person to say that.
Right, like so, like I think he's a dumb, awesome, like side character that when he does show up is always like stupid fun. The way that he shows up in like Rabid Mario's is so good.
Haven't
As
gotten there.
like,
You be quiet. I
oh
can't beat the
God,
ice golem. I'm very mad at myself.
really? Okay, all right.
And it's because I'm going for a perfect. Like if I were
Nice.
allow one of my people to die, I'd be fine. But no, I'm not gonna allow that.
No,
And I
man, you
think
just gotta
it's
go grind some coins. That's all you gotta do.
what I don't no, I don't gotta grind coins. What are you talking about?
so that you can buy some better weapons.
No, I have the best weapons for all of the
Oh,
characters.
you haven't unlocked some of the other stuff yet. I forgot that there's an unlocking system
Yeah,
that they
like
kind of
that's
eat off some stuff.
the
Oh
gatekeeping
man.
in that game is the problem. And I mean, the big issue with that one is that you're just given Princess Peach in that one. And it's like we
Yeah.
talked about with Saints Row. I was gonna bring it up talking about Agents of Mayhem. Is that like I've poured all my resources and all my points like into a team that like really works for me. And in addition to the fact that like, oh, you can't stomp on this one. You can't stomp on this guy. So
Yeah.
hope you didn't put all of your ability points into Mario's jump ability, like an idiot.
You
No,
can
you can
re
reset. I know, and I've
yeah,
already done
yeah.
that. But
Yeah.
it like really bummed me out that I'm like, I don't understand why I can't jump
You
on
know
this
the
guy.
you know the thing that yeah, well, there's some moments in that game where you're just like, oh, if I could just do this one move that you're for some stupid reason not letting me do, which is much more than navigating the world than anything else for me, like pushing blocks. Anyway,
Yeah,
um,
no, that I'm like, I can't wait till I
that
can
shit pisses
pull
me off.
fucking blocks.
Yeah, but the big thing that fight taught me, not to go in like a whole other direction before we end the show, but the big thing that fight in particular taught me is that if you set people in specific areas when you choose them in your lineup, then you'll get to keep certain characters while the other one disappears because they can replace somebody when they bring Peach in, right?
Right.
You can actually alter it
It's
so
the
that they
third
replace a
person.
specific person,
Yeah, I know.
right? Right. And so like that was the thing that fight unlocked for me that then made it pretty stellar because I was able to figure out exactly who I wanted on the field where and I love that game, man. I love that
I
game.
would really enjoy that game, but that fight trying to get a perfect is just like it just keeps going that fight. It
Dude,
just keeps going.
yeah, I gotta be honest, I didn't perfect things my first time through. Like I didn't even think that I could. So I went back and perfected things after the fact.
Oh, I haven't not gotten a perfect up
Good
to
for
this
you.
point. No, I'm just saying, like that's the thing. So like if I were playing it your way, right? Like I
Yeah.
didn't know, then that'd be a different thing. But like the fact that every single match for me has been a perfect, like to come up to this one and be like, I'm not losing anybody. I'm
Hey
getting a
man, there's a
perfect
line.
here.
There's a line. You
That's
gotta
my
at some
problem.
point
My
you gotta
problem is
yeah.
that fucking line. And it always is. Because I bet when you go back, you can use like better weapons and stuff, right? Like,
Oh
is
yeah,
that?
yeah.
Oh,
No,
okay.
the
So,
whole point is once you get to some of the best weapons, you can just go through and just decimate some of those challenges and stuff. Yeah, man.
all right. So
Like,
I guess
and
I gotta give up all of my like hatred for that type of gameplay and just deal with it.
but you will definitely enjoy going back and destroying that stuff later
Oh
on,
yeah,
though, right?
I can't wait to destroy this guy
Yeah.
because I hate him. I hate
No,
him.
honestly, the big thing that I've done is go back and see how few of moves I can win everything in now that I've got the best stuff, and some of those fights I went from taking 5 turns down to one, like just in one turn, just going around just destroying everything. It's pretty fun going back once you're overpowered. That's one of the great things about that particular game.
All right. So I think this is where we're gonna end it though, because
Yep.
I really feel like we could keep talking. You got coaches to sell. I
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the big move's coming up. We'll, probably talk more about that on the show later. But yeah, I'm moving house, man. So yeah, I got to go take care of that this morning.
All right, so I'll let you do that. If you want to wish Sejohn luck on his big move, he can be reached on Twitter at Siege versus the World.
Or you can find Devon at Devon D Decker, and you can talk to him about my move for some reason.
Or maybe any of WarioWare. God damn it, you're terrible. I set you up for a beautiful conversation. I would have people who are like, so how you feel about Sejon's move? You doing okay, bud? Can I buy an ice cream soda pop? And I'll be like, I guess a guy from Tennessee is going to melt by the time I get it.
That one listener we have in Korea that keeps
Yeah, right? Who's going to be real upset about the unified Korea bit from this episode? But hey,
Hey.
that's just licensed fan fiction. Take it away, Will.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devon Decker and Sejohn Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.